Hey y'all, it's K-Bird Tweets, and this is Peace, Love, and Baseball. Welcome back, folks, to Peace, Love, and Baseball. I am your host, K-Bird Tweets, and it's great to be here with you yet again on another Tuesday. It is brutally freezing where I am at this time of year, end of January in the Chicago area, and I'm starting this week's episode off with that because the biggest way that it's really affecting my life is that my dogs are going a little stir crazy. If you've been around, you know that I've got two dogs. They're 4 and 6 years old, June and Louise. They are rescues from a shelter. So, don't ask me what breed they are because I'll talk your ear off about my theories forever. But what you do need to know is they're like athletically built dogs. They're pretty active. They're very well behaved. That's because they get walked a lot and they get a lot of interaction, but they have not really been able to go outside. Like, it's been that kind of cold here lately. And I'm filling you in on this because we have a couple great interviews that are part of today's episode. And you might hear June and Louise in the background a little bit more than you usually do. And, we try to keep that from happening here on the show. But when it's in the middle of a great interview that I am really excited for you to hear other than June and Louise making their voices heard in the background, it happens. So apologies for that. Might hear some of that later on in the show, but it is because they are not getting their normal amount of walks and getting playtime outside. And apparently they really need to be heard. They need to be a part of something, and they want to be here with us on Peace, Love, and Baseball. It is Philadelphia Phillies week here at Peace, Love, and Baseball, and we are heavy on the Phillies content today with such a historically rich franchise to learn about. Plus, we have two awesome interviews with Philly Sports Network's very own Regina Ham, as well as the fellas from the Small Hall Baseball podcast as part of our Phillies feature. But first, we're going to touch on two very important things that I feel it is my duty as the host of Peace, Love, and Baseball to bring to your attention this week. Let's kick it off with this week in Peace, Love, and Baseball. First, we need to talk about how T-Pain, yes, the rapper T-Pain, we need to talk about how T-Pain can sing. Did you know? I actually did know this, and I had forgotten because he won The Masked Singer in 2019, and I've caught maybe 3 or 4 episodes ever of The Masked Singer. Not necessarily a huge fan, not something that is queued up on my DVR, but it's entertaining. I get it. I did catch an episode or two of the season that T-Pain was on, and I remember then being like, "What? The T-Pain?" But now he has recorded an album called On Top of the Covers, Live from the Sun Rose, and it's a whole album of covers, and you need to hear it. He covers everything from Sam Smith, which he sang, I believe, on The Masked Singer, Chris Stapleton, to Journey, and Lenny Kravitz. So before The Masked Singer, he was pretty exclusively a rapper, and I literally could not name one T-Pain song if my life depended on it. I could not. So, mad respect, T-Pain. Whether you like him as a rapper or not, you have to check out this album on Spotify. I linked it in the show notes for you. Check it. Our second point of attention here in This Week in Peace, Love, and Baseball is a feel-good story that's been in the news this week, and I'm particularly passionate about this one because it shows, it tells us that studies very legitimate studies from Science Direct show that napping with your pet is good for your health. And these days, the dark days of winter, when my husband's watching football and I'm just waiting for baseball to come back, nothing sounds better than a nice little cat nap with the cat or the dog. So yeah, this 2022 study found that naps actually help enhance cognitive performance in humans, particularly your memory. It can also improve vigilance. It can also improve vigilance and improve the speed at which you process information. 20 to 30-minute naps are optimal, according to lots of studies, but this is mentioned in that one as well. And napping with a pet is supposedly even better because it can help your dog or cat to trust you and strengthen your bond. I believe it because, I mean, all three of my pets sleep with us every night. There's a lot of pet co-sleeping going on over here. Plus, snuggling up to your pet leads to an increase in the release of neurotransmitters like dopamine and oxytocin, which are, often referred to as the feel-good hormones. Who needs drugs? Snuggle up to your cat or your dog. It can also boost your immunity to bacteria along with the mental and emotional benefits. So, you know what? I am in full support of it. It's working well for me over here. And I mention it because I go to sleep every night with my cat. He sleeps on the outside of I sleep on the right side of the bed. He sleeps on the outside of my right shoulder, and he puts his head on my shoulder and nuzzles in almost into my armpit. It's so cute and it's so sweet. And there are literally times, you guys, when I tear up at night when I'm falling asleep because I'm like, this is just the happiest, loveliest thing. And I feel so loved by this creature, and it's beautiful. It makes me better for the world. So I hope that for you. I hope that for everyone. I think the world would be a better place if we all had more pet snuggles and pet naps in our lives. Thought it was worth mentioning. You know what else is science? Is our baseball focus of this week in Peace, Love, and Baseball, signing Matt Carpenter to the St. Louis Cardinals. It just makes sense. Our baseball feature for this week is on the Cardinals signing free agent Matt Carpenter to a 1-year deal at major league minimum. Those minor leaguers are like, I wish I was making $740,000. I wish that for you too. But that is what Matt Carpenter is going to make from the St. Louis Cardinals. However, he was traded from the Padres, who he had signed a multi-year deal with and was still owed $5.5 million in his deal with them. He was traded to the Braves, who took on a certain portion of that salary as part of the trade, and they were really just interested in getting the other player that was part of that trade. So taking part of Matt Carpenter's salary off of the Padres docket was just part of that deal. And they designated Matt Carpenter for assignment, let him go the next day, and just said, hey, we're going to pay you, but you are not on our team. And that means that any team could sign him for major league minimum. And you knew the Cardinals were going to be all over that. I could do a whole episode on this, obviously, but there's two big things I want to talk to you about here. First of all is the messaging that we're getting from the team, and that he is signed as a veteran presence on the bench, and his leadership is a big part of why they're signing him, his voice in the clubhouse. I'm totally here for that. I think John Mozeliak has been listening to Peace, Love, and Baseball, prioritizing vibes coming into 2024. And I do think that there is a lot of validity and good points to be made in that leadership comes in different forms. And we're actually going to hear the guys from Small Hall Baseball podcast talk a little bit about this, and different players on the Phillies roster from time to time that have represented leadership in their organization differently as well. So it's something that is a part of the makeup of every team. I think there's absolutely something to the fact that Goldie leads by practice and preparation. Nolan Arenado leads in the way that he plays, the level of play that he maintains and expects from himself every day. And a guy like Matt Carpenter is going to lead from experience. The thing that I haven't necessarily seen touched on here or articulated in this way is that for the guys who are in the prime of their career, leadership looks different, and it simply cannot be, and it should not be prioritized the way that it can be for players that are at the next stage of their career, or for players whose value is different. It is maybe less on the field in play and more on the vibes and leadership that they bring, like an Andrew Kisner, right? There's a different kind of value to him than a player like Nolan Arenado. They have different strengths. They bring different things to the table. They're both important. We value monetarily those qualities and those things differently because we value the things that we can prove with numbers a little bit more in this world. Don't even get me started with that, but that is obviously that's where the biggest difference in value of how they get paid comes from. But there are also players who have a great value from what they bring out in others. And that is what we're looking as much to Matt Carpenter for as anything as he comes back to the Cardinals. So simply put, Goldie and Nato are pretty damn busy and focused on getting the very best goods out of themselves. Let's let Matty Carp help get the best out of the others. Okay, I think there's absolutely something to that. I'm buying into it. And maybe that's just because I am the target. I am the target for the St. Louis Cardinals right now. Some may say that millennial nostalgia is bankrolling the Cardinals, and I can't argue with that. It's me. Hello, I am part of the problem. Yes, it is me. And I can't apologize for it because I love it. It's what I want to see. It's what a lot of people want to see. And so that's the second point that I have to bring to your attention today is whether you're buying into that narrative, that is what we're hearing from the front office, whether you're into that or not. The Matt Carpenter signing is a good business move. Let me tell you why. It's business. This is analytics here, folks. The ticket sales and revenue streams to see Matt Carpenter, promotions around Matt Carpenter, do not get me started on a Matty Carp retirement extravaganza, because we can pull that out of our hat one way or another. Just depends on when we need it. Same as Waino. I mentioned this last year when a lot of fans were up in arms about bringing Adam Wainwright back. But there is more of a guarantee than a World Series ring or even a deep playoff run that we're going to make money off of an Adam Wainwright retirement tour. Can you imagine? Listen, he is not the reason that last season turned out the way that it did for the Cardinals, and there's as much of a chance that it was going to end that way with or without him. Even if we had brought in like a Sonny Gray instead of him last season, it still was just ultimately not going to be that different, right? And there's always a chance. Look at the Padres, look at the Mets, that no matter how stacked your team is, the cards can fall that way. It's over 162. There's a lot of outside circumstances that these owners are simply not willing to take a chance on. And your behavior, the fans' behavior, is so much more predictable when it comes to, are they going to show up for Adam Wainwright's retirement, than if the team is going to ultimately beat the odds, because that's what it is, to, get deep enough into the playoffs for that to make a serious dent in their revenue for the season. So it's easy math in that regard. And I hope I'm doing a good enough job of explaining it without going too deep into detail, because like I said, we got a lot of good Philly stuff to get to today. But my point being, it is not taking away from a roster spot that could be a difference maker in that regard. And it's going to make the Cardinals some money. And I want to see it. So I kind of can't blame them. I'd rather just like embrace it for what it is and be like, yeah, I mean, I see what you're doing. And it makes sense, because your number one priority is to run a successful business and make money. And it's not detrimental to you also potentially winning. It's not that kind of a move. that's going to be the difference maker. So there you go. That is this week in peace, love, and baseball. We have got to get to the Philadelphia Phillies because there's just a lot to know about the Philadelphia Phillies. And I am particularly fond of this franchise. I'm just into their vibe. I like a lot of their players right now. And so it was fun for me to learn more about the Philadelphia Phillies. So we are going to take a look into the Philadelphia Phillies franchise and learn more about them in more of a unique way that, I can't do simply through research. So we have an interview with lifelong Phillies fans who now host the Small Hall Baseball podcast, as well as a lead Phillies writer for the Philly Sports Network, Regina Ham, that we're going to wrap up the episode with today. But let's lay the groundwork for them here, shall we? The Phillies compete in Major League Baseball as a member of the National League East Division, and they came to be in 1883, way back when sports good manufacturer Al Reach, who was a pioneering professional baseball player, and attorney John Rogers won an expansion National League franchise for the city of Philadelphia. They are now known as one of the Classic Eight of the National League. They were awarded a spot in the league to replace the Worcester baseball team, a franchise that folded in 1882. The new team was nicknamed the Phillies from the start, and they immediately compiled a 173 winning percentage. Yes, I did not misread that, which stands as the worst in franchise history. So strong from the start. This is actually something that I did not realize about the Phillies, that there have been a lot more lows than highs. Although many sources, including the Phillies themselves, claim that Reach and Rogers bought the Brown Stockings and moved them to Philadelphia, according to baseballreference.com, no players from Worcester ended up with the 1883 Philadelphia Quakers, as they were initially known. So they were always nicknamed the Phillies, but their formal name was actually the Philadelphia Quakers when they first came to fruition in 1883. Interesting that there's this rumor that they bought a team and moved them, but they're like, no, actually, we made the team from scratch. And like I said, according to baseballreference.com, there were no players from that former team that actually ended up with this new franchise. According to the team-by-team Major League Baseball encyclopedia, in 1903, a balcony collapsed during a game, which killed 12 people and injured hundreds of people. So the original owner, John Rogers, was forced to sell the Phillies to avoid being buried alive, no pun intended, in lawsuits. In 1904, the team finished with a record of 52-100, making them the first team in franchise history to have lost 100 games. They were the first American sports franchise to hit the 10,000 loss mark. And the team holds the world record for the most ever losses by a single team in all of professional sports. This is not what I associate the Phillies with, is having the most losses ever in professional sports. It's crazy. The Phillies are one of only 9 teams to have won over 10,000 games in their history, though, as well. And obviously that is just as much as the losses due to the fact that they have been around as long as they have. So since the first modern World Series was played in 1903, the Phillies have played 120 consecutive seasons and 140 seasons since the team's 1883 establishment. The Phillies were the last of 16 pre-expansion teams to win a World Series, with their first championship coming in 1980. So they had been around for almost 100 years before they won a World Series. 1980 World Series MVP and a Hall of Fame third baseman Mike Schmidt is widely considered the franchise's greatest player of all time. So if you've heard of a Philly, it's probably Mike Schmidt. In more modern times, since the start of the divisional era in 1969, the Phillies have emerged as one of Major League Baseball's most successful teams, winning 11 division titles, including 5 consecutive from 2007 to 2011. They have 8 National League pennants since then and 2 World Series championships. That sounds more like the Phillies that I know. So imagine my surprise when I learned that all this losing was such a big part of their history. Their 1993 team was actually nicknamed Macho Row for their shaggy, unkempt, and dirty look. So they kind of claimed that territory and that vibe all the way back in 1993, which I was not aware of. But I think that's something that we see in the current Phillies team very much as well, and has just kind of been embodied as part of their culture. Their character endeared them to fans in this 1993 season, and attendance actually reached a record high in the 1994 season. This team beat the Atlanta Braves to make the NL pennant, but they were defeated by the Blue Jays in the World Series. Speaking of the Blue Jays, let's take a look back at the 1944 season, where the Phillies team held a fan contest looking for a new team nickname. So they were like, the Phillies just, maybe they were thinking they needed to have like, a physical mascot, like a moniker, the way that, what is a Philly? So they wanted to be something. That's, I guess, what it sounds like to me. They wanted to be like a real animal or have like a more legitimate mascot. But per the 1944 magazine publication called The Sporting News, and there's a really cool picture of this article that I found that maybe I'll share on social media. But the Phillies management chose Blue Jays, which was a fan submission from Elizabeth Crooks, who received a $100 war bond as compensation for helping to name the team. So the Phillies would actually later claim in the 2000s that the Blue Jays moniker was never official. However, news reports in 1944 note that Phillies management said that the Blue Jays name was an official additional nickname, meaning that the team had two official nicknames simultaneously, the Phillies and the Blue Jays. I had no idea that the Phillies were ever remotely known as the Blue Jays. I don't know if a lot of people know that because it never really caught on. And it also pissed off the Blue Jays at John Hopkins. So the team officially dropped it in early 1950. Coincidentally, the Phillies ended up playing the now Toronto Blue Jays in that 1993 World Series, and the Blue Jays won. The same Blue Jays moniker that the Phillies attempted to use then is now, or was used by the Toronto Blue Jays at the inception in 1977. So I'm sure it's still used on like their throwback uniforms, but that initial Blue Jays moniker was actually a product of the Philadelphia Phillies. How random. The Phillies have what most would consider a rebuilding years from the mid-90s to the mid-2000s, so might not have heard a ton from them then, though this is when they did draft and develop now Hall of Famer and 1997 Rookie of the Year Scott Rowland, before he was ultimately traded to the Cardinals in 2002. Then once again, the Phillies and some of their most well-known players took to making more baseball history, and Ryan Howard won the NL Most Valuable Player Award in 2006, and then Jimmy Rollins won that same MVP award the following year. So 2 Phillies in a row as MVP. After the 2007 season is when they acquired closer Brad Lidge from the Astros. So in 2008, they beat the Dodgers to claim another National League pennant, and they took it all the way to the World Series, defeating the Tampa Bay Rays. Game 5 of this World Series was the first ever World Series game to be suspended due to rain. The first 5.5 innings were played on October 27th, and the remainder of the game was played on October 29th. So started the game on a Monday, they finished the game on a Wednesday, and this was the championship clinching game. Crazy. The Phillies beat the Dodgers in the NLCS again in 2009 to become the first Phillies team to win back-to-back pennants and the first National League team since the 1996 Atlanta Braves to have an opportunity to defend their World Series title. The Phillies were unable to repeat the 2008 World Series victory. They were defeated in 2009 by those damn New York Yankees, 4-2. In June 2010, the team's scheduled series against the Toronto Blue Jays at Rogers Center was moved to Philadelphia because of security concerns from the G20 summit. This is interesting because they basically made the Phillies stadium where it was like the Blue Jays home stadium. You know, they played by the Blue Jays being the home team rules. So the Blue Jays wore their home white uniforms. They batted last as the home team, and the designated hitter was used at a National League ballpark for the first time ever. So this was the first time where we used the DH at a National League ballpark in a regular season game. Ryan Howard was the first player to fill the role. The Phillies finished the 2010 season with the best record in baseball, 97-65. In game one of the 2010 National League Division Series, Roy Halladay threw the second no-hitter in Major League Baseball postseason history. The Phillies beat the Cincinnati Reds 4-0. They did, however, lose the National League Championship Series to the Giants, but that was the year that Roy Halladay is named the 2010 NL Cy Young Award winner. If you're a Cardinals fan, pretty familiar with that Roy Halladay. Now, the Phillies were eliminated from the 2011 postseason by the St. Louis Cardinals in the National League Division Series. More specifically, Skip Schumacher, whom our Phillies fans from the Small Hall Baseball podcast actually hold specifically responsible for the downfall of the Phillies golden era. I think this was off the record when we were not recording that they were telling me about this, but it's just funny how getting that fan perspective, like that is what they remember in their minds from that series specifically. And they still hold it against Skip Schumacher to this day. But from 2006 to 2010, the Phillies win-loss record never went below 500, and the team won the NL East for 5 years in a row, from 2007 to 2011. Now, this is something that I tend to forget about, but in 2018, Gabe Kapler, who has just recently been named the assistant GM of the Miami Marlins and most recently was manager of the San Francisco Giants, he was appointed manager of the Phillies, and things overall are looking up after years of disappointment. This is the season that Aaron Nola emerges, and he has a record, according to baseballreference.com, of 17-6 with a 2.37 earned run average and a .975 whip. Here comes Aaron Nola. He finishes third in the National League Cy Young race behind Max Scherzer and Jacob deGrom this year. After the 2018 season is when Phillies owner John Middleton said they were willing to spend stupid money. I do remember this coming out. That's according to Tim Daniels of Bleacher Report. It was this offseason that they signed their current star, Bryce Harper, to a 13-year, $330 million deal. Currently, this is a Phillies team that you can expect to see in the postseason every year and for years to come. Their last World Series appearance was when they lost to the Houston Astros in 2022. And of course, they had that upset this past season in the NLCS where they were knocked out of the postseason by that hot Arizona Diamondbacks team. The team has played in several stadiums in the city of Philadelphia. They started in Recreation Park from 1883 to 1886. They continued to Baker Bowl, which is where where the big accident happened. The balcony crumbled and fell, from 1887 to 1938. Shibe Park, which was renamed Connie Mack Stadium. That's what I have heard it referred to. Renamed Connie Mack Stadium in 1953 in honor of the longtime Philadelphia Athletics manager, Connie Mack. They played there from 1938 to 1970. And then Veterans Stadium was their home from 71 until 2003. And now they are in Citizens Bank Park since the 2004 season, where they still are today. According to the book A Veterans Stadium Field of Memories by Rich Westcott, which was published in 2005, when the Phillies moved to Veterans Stadium in 1971, they hired a group of young ladies to serve as ushers. These women wore maroon-colored outfits featuring hot pants, and they were called the Hot Pants Patrol. Yes. Sounds like something that might have happened in the 70s. The team also introduced a pair of mascots attired in colonial garb named Philadelphia Phil and Philadelphia Phyllis. They're really trying to figure out this mascot thing. You know what? It's going to be worth the wait. It's going to be worth the strife and the struggles. But in addition to the costume characters of Philadelphia Phil and Phyllis, there was an animated Phil and Phyllis who would hit the Liberty Bell after a Phillies home run. Yeah. Shockingly, this pair of mascots never achieved any significant level of popularity with fans, and they were eventually discontinued. Yeah, not sure why that didn't work out. But in 1978, the team introduced a new mascot. Told you it was going to be worth it. The Philly Fanatic, who has been called the best baseball mascot, not just by me. Apparently, there are other sources here, and has been much more successful, has been closely associated with all of the marketing around the team and even with their minor league affiliates as well. The Philly Fanatic is elite, is an elite mascot. It was worth the struggle. Glad we got there. The Phillies have a ton of players who are now Hall of Famers, but those who are in as Phillies specifically, Richie Ashburn, Dave Bancroft, Jim Bunning, Steve Carlton, Ed Delante, Billy Hamilton, Chuck Klein, Robin Roberts, of course, Mike Schmidt, Sam Thompson, and Harry Wright. The Phillies organization is also very involved in supporting ALS research and awareness, as well as investing in many education and anti-drug programs in their communities. The Philadelphia Phillies AAA affiliate is the Lehigh Valley Iron Pigs, who I am repping today. If you are watching on YouTube, got my Iron Pigs hoodie on. They play at Coca-Cola Park in Allentown, Pennsylvania. The AA affiliate is the Reading Fighting Phils. The Class A affiliates are the Jersey Shore Blue Claws. They have a really cool logo. It's like a blue crab on a surfboard. I'm into it. They play in Lakewood Township, New Jersey. And then the Clearwater Threshers, who play at Baycare Ballpark in Clearwater, Florida. So now you know everything that, you could have looked up and learned about the Phillies on your own. But here's what you can't possibly know about the Phillies if you haven't been embedded in their culture really, since birth. We're going to hear from the guys from the Small Hall Baseball podcast here first, and then we'll take it over to Regina at Philly Sports Network and learn everything that you can't quite research about the Philadelphia Phillies. We are deep into our Philadelphia Phillies team feature this week on Peace, Love, and Baseball, and we're going to get some fan insight from the Small Hall Baseball podcast. So we actually have a father and two sons here who cover the Phillies, are lifelong Phillies fans, I think. We're going to learn more about that, but big thank you and welcome to Aaron, Frank, and Josh from the Small Hall Baseball podcast. How is it going today, you guys?
It's good. It's very cold in PA. Probably not as cold as Chicago, but still very cold and windy.
Right. There's definitely some solidarity this time of year of the Midwesterners and the East Coast. And we're all just waiting it out until pitchers and catchers report, and even better, opening day. So we're right in the thick of it, but this is a great time to learn a little bit more about different franchises throughout baseball. And as I'm sure you guys can agree, because you had me on your podcast towards the end of the season in late September when we were celebrating Adam Wainwright's 200th win, and you brought me on to give kind of that lifelong fan perspective of the Cardinals and Adam Wainwright and what that meant to them. And so I'm excited to get that same insight and angle from your fandom of the Phillies. Love that we have the whole family here, because that is often a big part of fandom. So I'm going to start by just asking y'all, how did you become fans of the Phillies?
I'm going to answer that, Kelsey, as the senior member of this podcast. I started following the Phillies in 1965. I was 8.5. And I grew up in a small southern New Jersey town right on the Delaware River, about 35 miles south of Philadelphia. So I was in their geographic area. And so the Phillies were really the only team. And the Phillies were not that great. But I mean, it seemed we got a Philadelphia newspaper because that's what happened. So I would read, the paper and the box scores. And so that was how it was for me. My mother and father were Italian immigrants, so they didn't have a big stake in following baseball. But as someone who was born in this country, I grew to love baseball and played Little League, and so followed the Phillies.
Yeah, you can tell that it's definitely ingrained far and wide. Anywhere in and around Philadelphia, that Philadelphia Phillies culture. So Aaron and Josh, did you guys you were born into it? Do you remember a time when you were not Phillies fans?
Yeah, that's probably better for Aaron to answer.
Because he's the older brother. He inherited it right away. For me, I was actually talking about this with my dad earlier, that when I started following sports, I was just the worst kind of fan. And when I say that, I mean, I don't know, 6 or 7 years old, maybe a little before that, I rooted for all of the best teams. So I was a Michael Jordan, Dallas Cowboys, Atlanta Braves kid.
Oh man.
Because they were all good at that time. And when you're a kid, it's like, oh, you root for the hotness.
Sure.
And the Phillies had come off of the World Series in 93, but that was about it. And then as time went on, it just sort of faded and became Phillies, Sixers, Eagles, and it just sort of osmosis into me. And now it's sort of embarrassing to think about, because Michael Jordan posters, and I had Atlanta Braves stuff in my room, and Cowboys stuff, and I'm sure it stabbed deep into my father's heart to see all of that crap.
PU.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
a Ken Griffey Jr. fan, but that was probably the only acceptable thing.
Yeah. I was gonna say that I don't feel too strongly about, but who isn't a Ken Griffey Jr. fan? That's appropriate. But man, of all teams, the Atlanta Braves too. Like, you couldn't, pick the Dodgers or something that at least aren't a threat on the same side of the country or like in the same division.
I probably the only one that might have hurt my father more would have probably been the Cardinals.
Really? Actually, yeah,
Yes.
let me ask you guys about this, because I probably have a different perspective on it as, not a born and bred member of the Phillies fan base. Who are like the top two teams that you would consider your rivals? Like, what two teams is that stadium sold out and the energy is just like next level for the Phillies?
I would say the Mets and the Braves.
Probably now, yeah, the
Yes.
Braves.
Yeah. Has it always been that way, Frank? Or would you say,
No.
like, when you were growing up, was it different?
Well, part of my life, the first, let's say, 15 years of my life, they played at Connie Mack Stadium. And they, the Phillies weren't that great. I mean, they were okay, but, it wasn't great. It wasn't until they moved into Veteran Stadium in 1971 that, you started seeing attendance increase. I mean, I went to games in the 70s, during my teenage and, young adult years. I probably the Mets. I can't think of who else.
The Dodgers, maybe
Pittsburgh, the Pirates, because in the 70s, the Pirates were in our division and the Pirates were good. I think the Mets would be the other team, because I remember in the 80s when they came into town and the Phillies were 20 games behind them, that they couldn't clinch the division, the Mets, and the Phillies swept them, and the fans apparently did damage to seats at Veterans Stadium. So,
oh, wow.
So anyway, I would say Pittsburgh and the Mets during my youth.
Yeah, it's interesting how proximity definitely used to have more to do with it, and now it's all shifted as the game has evolved. But we are very big on, vibes here at Peace, Love, and Baseball. So I want to ask you a little bit about the culture around the Philadelphia Phillies that might make them different than other franchises. Who would you guys consider a current or even a previous player a Phillies player that best embodies the Phillies culture to you?
Josh, I'll let you have a stab at this.
Well, I think a lot of in a lot of cases, the current culture is probably best expressed by someone like Bryce Harper. He comes in and he's done his best to ensure that he's getting back on the field as fast as possible, going wherever he needs to. He is often I don't know how to describe it, but it comes off to a lot of outsiders as pandering. If you watch his press conferences and he talks about the greatness of the fans and the knowledge of the fans, but I actually do believe he's being genuine, especially when he played in a place like DC for
Yeah,
a number of years before coming to Philadelphia. You know, we lived around DC for years and years and years. The fan base is not particularly great, and it's mostly because it's a transient fan base.
sure.
So for him to come to Philly, which is a real hardcore, real hardcore fan base, and talk to them and with an understanding nature, it has really ingratiated himself well. But he does that with a lot of talking. If I'm going to go into the past, and it's not that far in the past, someone who led by example more than by talk would be Chase Utley.
Yes.
Chase
Mhm.
Utley would be I would say probably in action, the one that embodies the grit and the spirit of Phillies culture and the culture of our fandom more than any other player probably in the last 35-40 years.
Yeah, what are some words that come to mind? I guess like characteristics. You said grit. Are there other words that come to mind? Just like characteristics that when you think about Chase Utley.
Hard-nosed. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, he's a guy who took abuse, so to speak, whether he was getting hit by pitches, whether he threw himself all over the field. His uniform is never clean after any game. I mean, even when he had a day off, his uniform seemed to be dirty for whatever reason. So for someone like him who didn't say a lot, although he made a rather famous off-color comment during the last World Series parade in 2008, but he didn't, he wasn't one to talk a lot. He led by example, did, and it's this more appeals to sort of the older fans like my father, but he did things quote unquote the right way,
Sure.
whatever that even
Yeah.
means.
I do think you're playing into the rest of this episode very well, because one of the other topics that we're touching on in this particular episode is the different styles of leadership and different ways that you can lead. So you just gave me two great examples. All right, guys, I want you to tell me about a current player in the Phillies system. Obviously, we've got Bryce Harper, we've got Trey Turner, Kyle Schwarber, all these big stars, Aaron Nola that we can be really excited about. But is there someone that you as fans, like in the thick of it, might know about, you're excited about, that fans from other teams might not have on their radar yet?
I was gonna say somebody like Johan Rojas. He came up. He had, excuse me. He had a pretty good. Hitting over 300. He's got the speed. He can field, because I know that was that for years became a liability at center field, especially for the Phillies. I think if he can learn how to bunt, which I've seen that he's already someplace just doing bunting drills over and over and over again, because if you're fast, it's nice to be able to know how to bunt.
Mm-hmm.
If he can learn how to sort of refine the skills, because he's got the speed, he's got a little bit of pop, he could be sort of a, God help me, a Kenny Lofton type, sort of not a lot of pop, but he can go gap to gap, he can fly around the bases, something like that. So I'm happy to see his progression. And it should be fun because I'm more interested in his future than I am because somebody like Kyle Schwarber. If anybody who's listening to our podcast, we have our thoughts about Kyle Schwarber, but I'd like to see more of a contact guy with speed than somebody trying to hit, swing for the downs constantly.
Yeah, he's filling a spot right now. He's got a particular skill set, but yes, you know what you're going to get from Kyle Schwarber. It is cool to hear you talk about someone who maybe we haven't seen reach their full potential yet, or you don't quite know what to expect from them, but the team is clearly invested in developing them. So one of the questions that I like to ask fans of other teams that I think actually helps other fan bases connect the dots or kind of get an idea again of like the vibes, the culture, is that if you could pick one player who is currently in Major League Baseball, who is not on the Phillies, who you think fits into the culture, no need to fill a current need for the team. Like, don't think about who you would have to take off the field to put this guy out there. Just somebody who should be a Philadelphia Philly. Who would you pick?
I think we're all going to answer this one. We will try to be brief.
Yeah, go for it.
Dad, go. God.
Mike Trout. Mike Trout's from my part of the world. Yeah, he's from Millville, New Jersey, which is about 30 miles east of where I grew up. I mean, he could have played for the Phillies, but he wasn't drafted because the Phillies, I think, had just won the World Series and their draft status was much lower. But he's a season ticket holder for the Eagles. He would fit into the culture, but I will tell you, and I think my son Joshua would agree that this doesn't answer the question, but we were concerned that hometown boy coming and playing in Philadelphia might be a problem because they would have great expectations. And, he's been great for the most part. But to answer your question, you could cut out the other part. I would say Mike Trout.
Yeah, I love that. And I have when there was all this talk around him being traded, that was the only place that I was like, okay, if it's going to happen like that, that's the only thing that I really feel okay about. So I love that answer. How about you, Josh? Anyone come to mind?
My father said Mike Trout, but the guy I think would do well, and I'd love to have him, is Garrett Cole, because he is, he's a machine when he pitches, and if he can handle pitching in New York, then Philly is a cinch. And you can never have too much pitching ever.
Yes. Amen. I think we've all learned that one way or another. But yeah, I could see him. He is just a guy who's not afraid to be himself too. And that's something that I appreciate about the Phillies is it seems like they really just embrace the guys, whether it's speaking to the media just as themselves or the way that they show up and the accessories that they wear on the field and that kind of stuff. So I like that answer too. Aaron, you got another one for me?
I do. And this probably be a little closer to home. Somebody that I've always wanted to play for the Phillies would be Paul Goldschmidt.
Oh, yeah.
I've been seeing a lot of this stuff because of course I'm on our Twitter all the time and talking about like leadership and things like that with the Cardinals and all the Matt Carpenter stuff that I've been reading the last couple of since yesterday or whatever. And Goldschmidt is somebody that I would like because he's very workman. He's not you have somebody like Bryce Harper, who's the talker, and you have that sort of voice for the media and things like that. But Goldschmidt is somebody that I would have loved when he was with the Diamondbacks and things like that. I was like, please, can we, when we, after Ryan Howard and before Rhys Hoskins, even after Rhys Hoskins, frankly, but somebody who is a good fielder who can obviously be an MVP because he is, and just go out there and play. And if questions need to be answered, he can answer them, but otherwise, just go and produce and, lunch pail town kind of thing. Just go and play. I've told my dad that for years. I would have loved to have had Goldschmidt.
I mean, I just think who wouldn't want Goldie on their team? Obviously, I'm a huge fan. And yeah, you said it. Like, he is just the kind of guy that keeps his head down and goes about his business. And I think if you met him on the street, he would never ever come off to you as like you would never suspect that he is like an athletic superstar. That would never cross your mind that he is also that guy. And that's something that I love about him, because there's like weird similarities between him and Bryce Harper, but then personality wise, like they're totally different at the same time. So, all three of those were great answers. I'm glad all three of you answered it, because it gave us a little something different to talk about, but I could see where they all fit right in. Well, maybe you can each give us one reason here too, because I like to kind of give a chance to the fan base that we're featuring to sell their team to our listeners. And we do have a lot of listeners from overseas who maybe are just learning the game or like fans of baseball, but they haven't fully committed to one team fully. So here's your chance. I'm a new baseball fan, don't know much about who I should, really throw my weight behind. What are the top 3 reasons to be a Phillies fan?
Dad, you can.
Oh boy. Top 3.
Just one. Just we can each give one.
All right. I think the fans, and I speak for myself, we love baseball, and we have a lot of passion for the game, and we have players who want to play in Philadelphia. So I would say these guys, to be a Phillies fan for my team, they want to be here. They want to play, and they appreciate the fan base. So, I mean, you have this appreciation of, not only the city, but, just being supported by these fans. And interestingly enough, a lot of these guys who come to Philadelphia end up, even after they go to other teams, end up coming back and living in the Philadelphia area.
Yeah, I have noticed that. That's a good point.
So that's my answer. It's not too convoluted.
Yeah, I think you said, you more or less said like a mutual respect for the game on both the fan side and the player side, and I definitely see that.
Yes.
Josh, what is your reason that we should root for the Phillies?
Wow. So when I first saw when Aaron sent me the questions and I saw my first thought is, do I answer this cynically or do I answer it legitimately? And I've been a Phillies fan for, I would say 86 was the first season I followed, so this is 24, so it's been 38 years of being a Phillies fan, and it's been a lot more bad than good. But the Phillies have become like family to me. And the one thing about family is they're yours, and they become a part of who you are. And I find that the good times and the bad times, it gives me a certain, the Phillies have given me a certain amount of stability, especially in times of life that weren't all that great. Even when they weren't particularly good or even competitive, they provided that kind of stability, and knowing that, day in and day out, they would be there, playing the games, hopefully giving their all. So there's something that I feel I owe them as a fan, to be invested is sort of in return. It's like
Yeah,
you mentioned, a mutual respect back and forth. This is sort of just a different side of that coin right there.
for sure. Yeah,
And
they've been a great constant in your life. I think that's awesome.
I mean, they've been around for 140 years, as a franchise, one of the longest continuous franchises in all of professional sports. And, it's just a matter of the being the next, the current generation, of fans, again, giving their passion to the team.
Yeah, for sure. That is something that I love about the older franchises is the ones that are still so beloved, like the Phillies are honestly the top example that I would think of is they have evolved with the times in a way that newer franchises just have not been around long enough to really experience. All right, Aaron, you're going last, so arguably you have the hardest time with this, but what's your reason to be a Phillies fan?
I think it's because I'm trying to think of how to word this. They will. I think it's because a reason to be a Phillies fan is because the other fans particularly will expect a lot of you, and you can. It can be tough to be, as Josh said, a lot more bad than good, unfortunately. But I think a reason is that you can really give it your all. And yes, Phillies fans are perceived as jerks, which I can certainly see that with a lot of fans that I see tweeting, and even the local paper. As I said, nobody hates Philly athletes more than Philly media. I've seen that a lot on Twitter. But you can really give it your all because everyone else is opinionated. You can be opinionated. There's no sort of like mollycoddling about it. It's, everybody wanted, a bunch of people wanted Aaron Nola back. A bunch of us didn't want Aaron Nola back. And then he's back, and it's like, we all said our piece. Now that he's back, let's just go. It's kind of a thing where we can all just we bond over the sport. We're all kind of jerks about it. We can be, at least, myself included. But it really is a place that you can be passionate. And as long as you're not violent, then everyone else is also passionate, and you can really, really put your whole body forward into it. And it's not a casual thing, especially not Phillies or Eagles, but especially not
that's a great point. And I'm sorry I didn't say it first, but I'm glad you did. That there are no bandwagon Phillies fans.
No.
Yeah.
And that's part of the joy of being a fan of the team, is knowing that in part you're going to get looked down on by other fan bases. And I for one actually kind of embrace that. I enjoy that part of my fandoms that make me a masochist, probably. But the fact that there's no, it's not like rooting for the Yankees.
Right.
Around the world, and
that's a fair comparison.
Yeah.
Oh, that is excellent. That's really good stuff. I'm glad we are kind of wrapping up on that, because that is something that is very unique. And I'm like smiling from ear to ear, because I don't think of that as a bad thing at all. You're right. It is like a reason to be a Phillies fan, because there is always this like healthy level of fire and debate. And obviously, if you have followed the postseason the last couple of years, you know that there is no home field advantage like there is of playing in Philadelphia at Citizens Bank Park. It just blows my mind every single time that I watch a postseason game there and that environment. And that's such a perfect representation of exactly what you guys are talking about. All right, fellas, I am so glad that we got to connect and talk a little bit about your Phillies fandom today, but you do awesome weekly content on the Small Hall Baseball podcast, where you talk plenty of Phillies, but you also talk just plenty of baseball, and have all the hottest and best takes specifically on the Hall of Fame and how, exclusive that may or may not be. So tell us where we can keep up with your podcast and follow you on social media.
You can only social media that I run is on Twitter, X, we call it Twix, at Small Hall B-Ball at twitter.com is the only place, and I'm relatively active. I just kind of have it up even when I'm working to just respond. Yeah, a lot of Hall of Fame talk. And for the podcast itself, you can find us on Spotify, Google, while it still exists. Unfortunately, Google is sort of shifting, but pretty much everywhere except Amazon. You can do Apple Podcasts, wherever, as my brother says, wherever you find your podcasts.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing a little bit about your love and following of the Philadelphia Phillies. I appreciate you, and I'd love to have you back sometime soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Today on Peace, Love, and Baseball, we're talking all about the Philadelphia Phillies, and who better to dig into it than Regina, who writes all about the Phillies. She is the head Phillies writer for the Philly Sports Network. Regina, thank you for joining me tonight. I'm super excited to have you here on Peace, Love, and Baseball. How's it going?
It's going so well. Thank you so much for having me. Greetings from at the time of this, a very snowy Washington, D.C., very cold Washington, D.C., all of us waiting the 31 days for pitchers and catchers to report. And then happiness begins again.
Yes, it will be here before we know it. I know, but these are some of the darkest, hardest days, especially if you are on the East Coast, which I'm sure a lot of our listeners are, as we're talking about the Phillies today. So you grew up very close to Philadelphia. It has been a part of who you are. But tell us, how did you start covering the Philadelphia Phillies?
So I worked in sports full time for 7 years prior to this. I worked in television. I worked in international sports, which baseball, not always the biggest sport unless, you're in a lot of the Asian countries like China, Taiwan, Japan, South Korea. Baseball is a thing. And then, unfortunately, as the sports world happens to be, I say it's a badge of honor when you get laid off. It happens to all of us at some point. I was really, really lucky enough that my really awesome boss, Liam, reached out. He was like, hey, we would love you to cover hockey. And I was like, would love to. And then I noticed during the Phillies World Series run, they needed some writers. I was like, hey, I've been a Phillies fan my whole life. I've been a baseball human my whole life. I would love to help out. And that's kind of the transition into doing that. I had a really great opportunity covering a heartbreaking Phillies World Series run, and it's been a great team to work with ever since. I love the whole staff that we work with. There's about, I'll say 5+ of us. The actual number fluctuates in my head sometimes. I think sometimes there's 2, sometimes there's 10. We'll say 5 and we'll figure it out. And they're just all really great. Everybody's really talented, and it's been a lot of fun. And, like I said, incredibly heartbreaking the past couple of years to have to deal with the disappointments and the losses. But, I've got a good, we'll say cautious optimism, as you will.
Oh, and I think you should. One of the reasons that I'm looking forward to talking to you a little bit more in depth about the team today is because they are so fun to watch. I mean, I feel like as soon as my team has been eliminated, like that's the bandwagon that I'm jumping on, or like you can't root against them because they're just so fun to watch. So from an outside perspective, from somebody who's not covering them, following them day to day, the vibes are absolutely, they are there. They're immaculate. I think we're all in on them as baseball fans in general. But is there anything in particular that comes to mind that maybe you could tell us about the Phillies that you would want other fan bases to know that maybe they don't know if they are not avid fans of the team?
I think the interesting thing about the Phillies is you have to realize, like, this is a storied franchise. Like, the story's got a lot of complicated pages. It is not perfect. We are not the Yankees who, won 85 million World Series in their lifetime. We are a very tough love city. I always say it's about Philadelphia sports fans, whether it's baseball, whether it's hockey, whether it's football, which has been the most heartbreaking thing over the past couple of weeks, is we could fly you in from Alaska. You could be wearing a Phillies jersey and it would be like, you're my new best friend. And that's a camaraderie that not only extends among the fan base, but extends among the team. I mean, watching the NLCS games last year, absolutely heartbreaking losing to Arizona, but the camaraderie that the team had, the hype that the team had, you don't get that everywhere. I think especially when you have a lot of teams where, you have your big players, like you're going to look at the Los Angeles Dodgers this year, having Shohei Ohtani and Yoshi, and you're just going to say, wow, they're probably going to be fun to watch. But, because they're so blue blood, because they're so, high budget, we'll say highbrow, we'll say the high society. I don't think you get that same kind of camaraderie ship. You do in a different way.
Yeah.
And I think the thing to realize too is, like, the Phillies have gone through ages. Like when we fired Joe Girardi, Rob Thompson, it was the interim coach, and we were like, well, all right, see how this goes. And in his first managerial season, to be able to take them to a World Series like that is pretty incredible. And that's something that I always say, Philadelphia sports, especially the Phillies, is a roller coaster. If you take heart medicine, please don't cheer for them sometimes. It won't be good for you. But it's one of those things that you really commit to, and you have a fan base for life. You have a team for life that will frustrate you most of the time, but like the highs are high, the lows are low, but there's just something about it that's like a very Philly magic thing that really brings people together from everywhere. And I think that's pretty special.
That reads on the outside. And I mean, you make a great point. You have to experience those lows for the true magic to really be there. And that's a big part of what makes it feel so magical, and how you enjoy the highs. So we know that obviously the Phillies are a team that has a lot of stars. You mentioned the Dodgers, but I think one of the things that, like, at least me as a fan of baseball, it's easier for me to root for the Phillies because even though they have those big stars, Bryce Harper, Trey Turner, I don't know, there's still that strategy part of it and that kind of homegrown feel of they do retain more players. You hear about how they have more of a culture that players want to stay for and even, give a discount for it and that kind of stuff. We know Kyle Schwarber. We know these bigger names. Is there someone that comes to mind on the Phillies roster currently, could even be like on the 40-man roster, who you might mention for fans to keep an eye out for that maybe we haven't heard about?
So I think for me, I'm a big pitcher girl. Like I love my bullpen. I love my starting rotation. And by love, I mean sometimes they're stress inducing. And I think that's the thing is like, the Phillies have a lot of power bats. Like you look at Kyle Schwarber, who I think among consensus, we can agree we never should stick him in left field again. He's a lovely man, I'm sure, but he is not a fast one. And that was not the couple games we watched where he was there. It was painful. But, I think we need to look at our relievers this year and our bullpen. Like we just re-signed Aaron Nola to another deal. I'm hoping Zach Wheeler gets done before spring training. But I think those guys are fine. We're consistent. I think you need to look at guys like Sir Anthony Domingo. You need to look, Dominguez. You need to look at our, oh my gosh, my brain is just drawing a blank. It's what kind of happens. And you have a giant bullpen of men. And you have guys like Michael Lorenzen, who is really great. The game in that everybody remembers.
Oh my gosh. It was one of my favorite games.
We're calling him a kid. He is a child.
Yeah.
Watching someone like that make such a historic start for himself is just absolutely incredible. And I think something about the Phillies that I really enjoy as well is that for our bullpen, they are pretty fantastic. Jose Alvarado, Jeff Hoffman, you have a bunch of really great guys. Now, I personally think Jose Alvarado, now I will go on record here, as we say, that he gives me the ick. And here's why I will explain, but I also really like it. I say you should watch him, but he also will give me the ick. Okay. So the thing with him is he is a fantastic pitcher. He is a fantastic reliever. He is one of those guys that you can bring in, bottom 7, you're down by 2, and, give you that safety of knowing that your batters might be trash and our plate appearances might be trash, but at least for pitching will be okay.
Okay.
And they won't post anymore. It might be, 5-0 and we're screwed after that, but we're going to make it work. The thing with him is the fact that, he's a big guy too. He's a little younger than me. He was, born 1995, he's this big 6'2", 245-pound guy. And he's a lefty. And the thing with him is while he is absolutely fantastic, he has games that make you cringe to the point that you're like, I would like to take a shower. However, when his career postseason is absolutely fantastic. I think that's the thing that for me really sealed the deal this year was in 2023, he only made one appearance. He has one win. His ERA is 3.43, but he was able to give the Phillies a solid arm that was consistent in the postseason. Now, regular season, him again, heart attack. But even though people are gonna be like, well, Regina, there's tons of better guys out there, to look at on the roster that might be someone we should look out for. But for me, as a girl who loves pitching, who grew up, all of my friends that I knew that played baseball were pitchers, and I absolutely just love watching it because I think there's just something so finessed about pitching. Like, yeah. You could be a power hitter like Kyle Schwarber, but there's a finesse that makes me so very, very happy. And he's got it. And that's the thing for me that I think is a really important part of why he is an absolutely stalwart, will be for a while too. I think, he had an incredible 2018 campaign. he has been the most healthy guy also in the past couple seasons for the Phillies. 2021 was really rough, but he managed in 2023 to finish in the top 10 ERA, at least among the relievers with 48 innings pitched. And that's something that I think is a great stat to look at. Like if you're a stat head like me and you really enjoy watching stuff like that. A really funny thing that I remember, especially on the funny side, the non-stat side, he is a towel artist. Back in August, there is a great tweet, I wish I could find it, where he made towel chickens with the towels in the dugout. And it's a great photo. I remember seeing it going, all right, this guy gives me headaches sometimes, but I love watching him on the mound. And this just solidified him for me.
Oh, yeah.
Towel chickens. And that's the kind of guy that he is. He does deal with elbow inflammation. Like I said, there is some tricky stuff, but he's under team control for the next through 2026. He's healthy. He can be an all-star caliber reliever. And I think like that's what you need. You need a man you can trust. Not saying the rest of the bullpen is bad. They're not. But you need someone who is trustworthy. And that is someone who's going to get stuff done. And again, if we could find the towel chicken tweet, it needs to be shown because it is just so good.
I'm going to look into it because I love that. I mean, I love that answer for so many reasons. I am very much a pitching gal myself. And it's always been something that, it's just like, I appreciate it on a different level, even as someone who's, I've never played the game, but you said it perfectly. There's a little extra something special about there's so much nuance to it, and perfect call out because you could watch the 10 Phillies games, every time they play your team all season and never see Alvarado, and he might not be on your radar at all. And then you had something fun in there, like personal and fun and personality wise to add to it too. So that was,
and I think that's such a key thing. I think that's such a key thing. And especially for me, like I've always said, as someone who's worked in sports, you really, especially when you follow a team and you're, also being a hockey writer, we don't even have to get into the Flyers and how fun they can be. But, that's the thing that I think makes players so interesting for us. Like I know a lot of people are big stat heads. They will love a certain player because his stats are fantastic. Your stats can be good for me. They don't need to be like caliber class.
Yeah.
However, the personality makes it because you're also realizing these people are humans at the end of the day too.
Right.
And they're going to have bad days, just like we're going to have bad days. And so I think stuff like that, and then watching them have like an absolutely fantastic, outing on the mound. And then you're like, wow, this is a guy who makes towel chickens. Yeah, he's got some elbow inflammation from time to time, but like he's good. He's dominant when he's healthy. He is just pretty good. And Rob Thompson used him a lot. Like it was him and Jeff Hoffman that were pretty much the weapons of choice during the 2022-2023 season. So I think that's a good thing. And he's just fun. He's a fun guy to watch.
I got my eyes on him. I'm putting him on my list. So kind of pivoting the other way, I'm going to ask you now, if you could pick one player who is a current Major League Baseball player who is not on the Phillies that you think fits into the culture. So it does not have to fit a current need on the team or be at all realistic, not necessarily a guy who's even available, but somebody who you're just like, that guy should be a Philadelphia Philly. Who would it be?
Oh, okay. I'm going to say something. I'm going to get in hot water. I may be banned from ever stepping foot in Citizens Bank Park again. However, I think Freddie Freeman would do very well. I know. I think he would do very well in Philadelphia. I was very lucky enough back in the 2018 All-Star game when I was here in DC to actually meet him. He's a really nice guy. Being 5'2", I felt like a very small human being, but he just was very jovial. You could see him interacting with everybody. He was just having a good time, and he's good. He's experienced. And I think for the Phillies, you want someone who is going to, when it's game time, it's game time. Mm-hmm. There's time to have champagne showers, or in Kyle Schwarber's case, hold a beer and look very confused at what's happening. But you also need to have a guy that's like, it's game 7, bottom of the 9th. You need to figure out, can he step up?
Yeah.
And that's the kind of guy that Freddie Freeman is. And I think Atlanta Braves fans, as sacrilege as I just said, will agree with me on this. And the Phillies don't need a guy like him. We really do need someone like Cody Bellinger, really, to add another power bat. But I think personality wise, you have to factor that in as well, because you can't. And this is why I will also make the hot take. I don't think Shohei Ohtani would fit in Philadelphia. As much as he would have been fantastic, I don't think he doesn't have the personality to fit.
Yeah.
And I think that's very part of team chemistry. You need to have not only are you a good player, are you a good pitcher? You need to be like, okay, how well are you going to mesh with the rest of the team?
Right.
And like the Phillies guys have a chemistry. Like Bryce Harper, as much as Nationals fans will, stick me in a volcano of lava, he didn't fit in DC.
Yeah.
Sure, he was good. He had his best early years here. He didn't fit. You watch him in Philadelphia, it's natural, like peanut butter and jelly. And I think that's what Freddie would do. He would be like the macaroni and cheese or marshmallows and Rice Krispie treats. And I think it would work really well. So Freddie, if you ever decide you would love to make an East Coast journey, I think we could forgive you played for Atlanta and maybe just sweep that under the bench. And you should just come join us with some cheesesteaks.
Yeah, our vibes only player list put Freddie Freeman on the Phillies. I'm into it. Okay, we have been talking about this actually prior to recording, how you and I could both talk about just about anything, but especially baseball all day long. So this might be a bit of a challenge for you. I'm going to ask you to give us your 60-second elevator pitch on why we should root for the Phillies. So think of me. I'm coming to you. I'm not a baseball fan, but I'm looking to get into it. Why should I pick the Phillies as my team?
I think that's the thing, is the Phillies are the best team for fans who aren't fans. If you're the casual observer, if you are the, hey, my boyfriend, girlfriend, partner really likes baseball, I don't care about it. Why should I root for them? You want vibes? We got vibes. You want very good men to watch run around bases and just smack dingers out of the park? We got a guy named Kyle for that. Kyle's great. We have a manager who's Canadian. Everybody loves Canadians. And you have a very fun team to rally around. You have a city that rallies around the team. And who doesn't love being part of a city like that? Who doesn't like being part of a fandom like that? And that's a very special thing. The vibes sometimes are tough, but we are known to be the backbone of our team. Look at Trey Turner, who, if you're not a fan, you don't know who that is. But we had a guy who standing ovation seemed to make the difference. So if you're looking for a really fun team, an exciting team, one that will break your heart and make you cry happy tears, I think the Phillies are the right choice for you.
You nailed that. We're at like 58 seconds, I think. And
thank you.
I can't even think of a better answer. And I totally agree. Even as someone who I've declared my fandom, the Phillies always kind of pull me in, like I said. But yeah, there's something just about the vibes. They're super high. I feel like I'm overusing that word, but it's just like the first word that comes to mind when I think about the Philadelphia Phillies. And you didn't even mention the Fanatic, who is by far the most mascot in all of sports. Do you agree?
I will absolutely agree. I wish I could get up and show. I have a Fanatic's pillow pet that I've had since college. He has traveled with me all across the country where I lived. He is a wonderful, special thing. And I think if you didn't think about it, the Fanatic is the only reason you should root for Phillies. Everybody else is fine. But the Fanatic, and especially Mama Fanatic on Mother's Day, that's the dynamic duo right there. Forget Bryce Harper and Trey Turner. Mama Fanatic and regular and
Harper and
Fanatic,
Turner.
all you need.
Harper and Turner will come and go, but the Philly Fanatic is forever.
Oh, it is. And Gritty too, but that's the weird cousin. So it's totally fine.
Well, we can get into that. Yeah. Once we fully sold you with the Fanatic. Well, Regina, this has been awesome getting to know a little bit more about you and your team, the Philadelphia Phillies. Tell the fine listeners where they can find you on social media and keep up with your Phillies coverage.
You can find me on Twitter at Regina_Ham, Ham, just like the food, Regina like George. And you can also find me on Regina Marie Sports, which is my Instagram as well. I typically post more on X, Twitter, whatever we're calling it nowadays. But you can find all my work there, and Philly Sports Network. You can also find all of our coverage there as well, and also some of my work. So check us out. We're a lot of fun. If you want some writers with personality, I guarantee you we got you.
Sounds great. I am there. Well, thank you again for hanging out with us today. And maybe we'll check in with you later on in the season, because I am sure one of these years, the Phillies' time is coming soon. So will you come back when they're making their World Series run?
Absolutely. Hopefully with good news instead of heartbreaking.
Right. Another big thanks to Aaron, Frank, and Josh from the Small Hall Baseball Podcast for joining us today, along with Regina Ham of Phillies Sports Network. All of their information of where you can find them on social media and follow their content is linked in the show notes. So please check it out and keep up with their great baseball content and their Philadelphia Phillies fandom. I hope you had some fun learning about the Phils with me today. Make sure that you are subscribed. If you are watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button at K-Bird Tweets Peace, Love, and Baseball YouTube channel. We're on Twitter. I'm on Twitter. Me and Raja, my cat, who's now getting in with the vocals here. You might hear him as well. He's actually taken over producer June's role. My dog June usually lays next to me while I record, but Raja has taken over the dog bed for the new season, I guess. So we'll see if dogs or cats are the better producers of a clearly very high quality professional podcast. But you can find me on Twitter at KBirdTweets. It's here in the corner if you're watching on YouTube. And of course, I've got it in the show notes for you. There is a link tree there. So if you find me on Twitter, you just click that link tree and you're going to find Peace, Love, and Baseball everywhere that you could possibly want to listen to it. Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts. You can listen to it straight through Podlink, all that good stuff. And you can find us on Instagram at peace.love.baseball and on Facebook. Peace, Love, and Baseball is the name of the page. And that is the name of the show that we'll be bringing to you every week, again next week, with a new episode on Tuesday. So make sure you're subscribed. If you feel so inclined, please leave a nice little rating or review. And I will catch you next week on Peace, Love, and Baseball.